and they're like, wow, you're asking some good questions and you're a great listener. And it's like, I'm genuinely interested, but I also do think that this experience in podcasting has just improved my ability to do both of those things in a way where I don't even realize I'm necessarily doing it. But if it makes people feel special, I'm all about that. So that's good.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Metacast. Today we have special guests. So Arnab, don't you think that every time I introduce guests, we actually say it's special guests?
Yeah, pretty much every other time, yeah. Well, they are special, but this time it's a bit more because this is something that we've been using like pretty much since we started podcasting.
Yeah. So today on the show, we have Zach and Rock, the founders of SquadCast, which is the tool that I think we mentioned in every single episode that we recorded, because that's the tool that we use for recording, and we love the tool, and they graciously agreed to spend an hour with us to chat about their experience and share their journey and give us some tips about podcasting. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
What's up?
Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it.
So to get us started, can you describe what a SquadCast is?
Sure. Yeah, SquadCast is a cloud recording studio, meaning we help creators connect all around the world with their collaborators to record studio quality content anywhere geographically that they can access the internet to record production level audio and video for those creators to engage with their audience, reach them in more places. So it's on the surface a lot like Google Meets or Zoom or something like that, but with high quality production content for getting those episodes out quickly and preserving the quality when we don't have the luxury or ability to get into a physical recording studio together. Increasingly, production is globally distributed, geographically distributed. Even pre-pandemic, I think that was the trend that was exciting. One of the trends that was exciting to Rock and I when we first founded SquadCast back in 2016. It's only continued to develop from there.
And you also run your podcast, right, between two mics. And I think in the very first episode, you talked about the origin story. And I really found it interesting because you were working on a sci-fi podcast at that time. And from there, like this idea emerged. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Before we go there, do you mind unpacking a little bit what you just said about SquadCast and just describe what is the user experience of SquadCast so that people can really connect the dots?
Happy to. So let's say I'm a creator. I have a podcast and a YouTube channel, or maybe record some voiceover or audiobook content, something like that. And I want it to be really high quality and record with other people. It's not just me monologuing into my show. It's me interviewing other people, connecting with maybe co-hosts or collaborators that maybe are or aren't in my same location, in my same city where we could get together in person. And that's really where SquadCast gives creators superpowers to be able to send their guest or collaborator just a link. They don't even need a SquadCast account or know who we are or anything like that. They click that link on the time that they scheduled, and we connect them with real-time, low latency, like audio and video, so they have a high-fidelity conversation. And first and foremost, we are under the hood a recording studio, a recording platform. So that's where we have 2 patents around our recording engine and how we capture that really high-quality audio and video for everybody in that conversation, and reliably deliver it to the creators once the recording is complete. There's a lot of really nice quality of life features along the way built in for creators, where you can have like transparency into the equipment your guest is using. You can help them dial in their settings of those equipment. You have transparency into the recording while it's happening. You can even watch the recording and listen to the recording while it's still happening with our new previews. And those files are going to be uncompressed wave audio, ISO for everybody in that conversation, up to 10 people you can connect and record with at the same time. And then the video is going to be, again, ISO, but MP4 with that muxed audio. And then the second piece of our patent is the time synchronization, making sure there's not any drift between those recordings that are captured on everybody's different device. to you and me, it feels like we just connected and hit record, but there's a lot of really advanced audio and video technology going on below the surface, and we show a lot of that to the creator. So there's a really high degree of like presence and transparency into the health of the recording that we're still doing, and making sure all of those details are, we're feeling confident as we create that content, not just like a black box where we're wondering if that file is going to come out the other side. As you can imagine, with like, ESPN and Google and bigger brands, like those episodes need to ship. They have like brand deals, like there's timelines, all that stuff, right? So I think it really helps with the creative process, especially if you're part of a team of creators. So this is where our mission is to amplify collaboration, and it's not just in the recording session proper, it's also pre-production and post-production of like scheduling and file management. So I think that's a pretty good lap around the UX. There's more we can get into. Happy to go in to any detail there.
Yeah, and that's Zach, the CEO of the company, pitching his product. But from my perspective as a user, I would say what I like about this SquadCast experience is that we just send the link, we just add the link to the calendar. Then people join, we have like a Zoom call in the browser, and all of the audio is recorded locally, I believe, so that there actually no glitches you hear over the network are on the recording. It's all local, so it's all high quality. And then after the recording is done, I just go to SquadCast dashboard and download all of the files in lossless WAV format, plug them into my Reaper digital audio workstation, and it just works. So previously, when I was recording with people, they would record directly into their computers or into their phones. I would have to like, oh, now you publish this file in Google Drive, save me the link, make sure that you have the permissions. So all of that basically low value add activity is gone with SquadCast. That works really well, especially for guests who are busy, who want to just close the browser window and forget about you. Then SquadCast just makes it happen. So yeah, thanks for building the tool. And yeah, Arnab, back to your question about the journey.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I have a quick question here too. You said it's recorded locally, right? Is it continuously synced into the cloud or only at the end of the session? So what happens if I lose network connectivity in between?
Yeah, any of those worst case scenarios, like the network going down or the power going out, or, kind of anything that you could imagine going wrong while you're recording is okay. You're not going to lose that recording within a few second margin of error. So what we're doing is we call it progressive upload. That's a key feature of our recording engine. And we are, yes, while you're recording, every few seconds pushing up the most recent chunk of audio and or video and or screen that you're capturing at that time. And we're pushing that up to the cloud in the background. And key distinction is that we're not streaming it. So your point earlier, Ilya, about you're not hearing the network compression in the recording like you would hear with something like Zoom or a phone call. And that's why we record it at the source, is that if we didn't record it at the source, we would be recording it in the cloud over the network, and therefore it would suffer from that compression if somebody's network had latency or jank. So that's how we balance out the quality and reliability and kind of deliver on both of those promises.
Cool.
That allows us to, if let's say the power went out right now, we've been recording for a few minutes, that content would be safe and sound in the SquadCast cloud. Even if your computer completely died, we don't depend on your computer or you needing to come back or anything like that after. We do depend and rely on everybody's internet connection. We're not an internet service provider at SquadCast. And that has its limits, like physics, and ISPs are notorious for throttling people's connections. But what we do is we're resilient in those situations and provide that transparency so that let's say that happened and we all disconnect, all four of our computers just died at the same time right now. What would happen is we would eventually be able to come back. You would see those files. They're kind of there, but in a lingering state. And what you would do is just click render, and our cloud will render the content that it has that was uploaded up to that point for everybody. That is not what most people on SquadCast experience, but we didn't get to the moon by engineering for the happy path, right? We got to the moon by building redundant systems. So even if what I just said, you don't believe me, Zach's a charlatan, that sounds fake, whatever, we also have backups recorded in the cloud at the same time. So it's not really local versus cloud. SquadCast does local and cloud, right? So if you say, okay, what's different about SquadCast from Zoom? Well, Zoom's only cloud recordings. SquadCast, you get local too, which is going to be that higher quality ISO, all those good things. And I also might add that you get them very quickly after you're done. With every other platform I've ever used to record, it takes a significant amount of time to get those files after. And meanwhile, the anxiety starts to kind of dial up. Like, am I going to get this file? When can I start working on my episode to publish it? With SquadCast, you click stop and your file's there in a few seconds. Even for like a 2-hour long video, it's nuts how quickly we render. And we were just able to increase our video rendering speed by 15,000% in November. So we're still finding ways to make it even faster.
Yeah, we did experience things like people dropping off the call accidentally because their internet connection went out. We, always freaked out because like, what's happening with the files? And then we would actually stop the recording, go into the dashboard, see that the files are there, and then would continue the recording after that. So every time files were there. So that's
awesome.
that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and the super fast part too. Yeah, like we're done and within a few seconds, like by the time we look at it, it's already there usually. Pretty cool.
Yeah, an important part actually also about the comparison with Zoom. If you use Zoom's cloud recording, I think it's all single track.
Yeah, it's all mixed.
Yeah, it's all mixed. And then with SquadCast, you get separate tracks for everybody. So you can do really good editing on it.
That's right. So let's say my dog walks by while you're talking, that you could easily like mute that out in post-production without interfering with your vocals, right? And then we also have tools in SquadCast to mix those files down if you want to. It's just really hard to go in the opposite direction. You end up starting to get into like AI speaker diarization and stuff like that. So what we do is we just capture everybody ISO from the start, and then it's easy to mix them from there where it's hard to go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, we know this part very well because my dog frequently hangs out here and like whines or something. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Did they say ISO? What was that?
Yeah, ISO or isolated tracks. So every speaker who's connected to the conversation is going to be, their files are just going to be them. And that could seem like a turnoff if you're like new to being a content creator, because now I have extra work to put the pieces back together. But there are, we believe, more benefits than there are drawbacks to that, especially with giving people an easy way to just say, okay, I have these 4 files, mix those down, and now I have basically the combined single file with all the speakers in it. That's something we provide in-app that's like an everyone feature.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think we keep saying in our podcast as advice for podcasters is that you should always separate your tracks, especially the more people you have, the more important it becomes. Like we had this episode with Jake and Jonathan, just 4 of us, and we were laughing for 2 hours straight. And those laughs, they're very disruptive when they're mixed together. So you have to compress them a little bit so that, one person laughing doesn't disrupt the other person actually saying something important.
And Jonathan was on AirPods, which the sound quality was like completely bad. So it was really important to have independent tracks so that we could tweak that.
Yeah. So Arnab, shall we go into the journey?
Yeah. So let's go back to our origin story. So you were doing some sort of a sci-fi podcast. When did you two meet? What happened? How did it all start?
How about I take this one, Zach?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
Four's tricky, fellas. So Zach and I have known each other since high school. We share a mutual love for technology, startups, podcasting. I've been a huge fan and believer in podcasting since I first got an iPod. I don't remember exactly when, but back when iPods were the shiznit is when I first stumbled upon this thing called podcasting. And I was like, wow, it's like radio, but it's on my schedule. I love that. I loved all of the vast amount of categories and different types of conversations and topics that you just couldn't find anywhere else. I mean, the range was all over the place, and I love that. And Zach and I both shared that mutual interest, but did go different career paths. And so fast forward to 2016, when Zach approached me about the idea that became SquadCast, and this is where the science fiction podcast part comes into play. So he stumbled upon these problems with remote content creation, remote recording quality, trying to create a science fiction podcast of his own and doing that remotely. And when he pitched me this idea and told me about how he had stumbled upon this problem and why he thought that that this solution that he was proposing to me would be valuable and important, it honestly just seemed very like easy to get excited about. Because like I said before, we were already big fans and believers of podcasting, but it was this intersection of podcasting and remote content creation, remote collaboration that just seemed like something that was worth putting our all of our effort and focus and hopes and dreams into, to be quite frankly, and just just saw us riding that wave, and then here we are. It's been pretty amazing. Podcasting, I still think, is like got a lot of growth to do, but it's grown tremendously since the time that we first started. So yeah, that's really the origin story there.
So what happened to that sci-fi podcast? Did you ever release it?
No, we actually pivoted from the sci-fi audio drama to building out SquadCast pretty quickly. We got like discouraged and then thought the production wouldn't happen because we were all split up geographically, and it's just going to take us forever to get a single episode out. Anybody who listens to sci-fi audio dramas, I know of individual creators working on them, but even they have people who help them with them. It is a team sport. I was tempted to say it's always a team effort, and I think it probably should be for the sanity of the creators working on fiction podcasts.
Any show alone is going to be a heavy lift.
Right. And that's where we're bullish on collaboration, right? Needing to happen here. And we've seen remote collaboration really get into its stride with work from home and shelter in place and all of those things. But Rock and I were fortunate that we both had jobs previous to SquadCast where we were working remote some percentage of the time. So we got to experience that and we say, okay, well, why would professional creators be any different from any other sort of professional who needs their tools, but now remote, collaborative, real time, all that stuff? And I did my internship before that on the Chrome team at Google, and I saw how they built software, scaled software, but also collaboration. Right, Google Docs really pushed that forward on the web platform, and that's what we wanted to set out to create was collaboration, real-time collaboration like Google Docs, but for long-form audio recording. Was our hypothesis. Like, if you're going to record for 2 hours with somebody, that's not an Instagram short, right? Like that's a heavy lift, especially if we start talking about source quality content. These are an individual file could be multiple gigs. Quite a set of engineering challenges there that we set out to tackle, and that's really what led to some of the unique abilities that we provide creators in SquadCast.
So you pitched Rock, and like, how long did it take you guys before that initial discussion and writing the first line of code? So like you know what you're doing, so you're starting to actually implement something.
Probably 2017. Oh, you did? You did before?
I could check the commits. But it was after, because I remember being weary that this was not just another project that you scaffold up, right? This is a whole cloud machine, right? Several apps in one, right? So we did it right? We did it API first, microservice architecture on Google Cloud Platform with real-time infrastructure, and really took all the lessons I had learned in my career previously to that. I taught at Cal Berkeley. I'd written a book on building apps in Angular and deploying those in different places. So really, took the opportunity to build something from the ground up that felt like over engineering at first, right? It felt like, are we ever going to need to scale kind of thing? But I'm grateful we did, because just a few years later with COVID, right, we had painful growth. I don't know how else to describe it. Really, really crazy growth from people just not being able to get in the studio anymore. That they used to be kind of debated about the merits of remote recording at all in podcasting before that. That conversation, the last time I saw anything about that was before COVID. Haven't heard anybody say anything like that since. I think we're here to stay.
Yeah, actually, I did an in-person recording once. I would say remote recording is easier.
We
than
think so
in-person
too.
recording.
I agree. We've done both. And I say that to people. I've said that on stages. And I don't know that people get it until they've experienced both. But yeah, you start to have to deal with like, how do I get my microphone not to pick up that other person's voice? You have to deal with this like setup, right? That is multiple microphones. And does your audio interface have multiple channels in and out? All that stuff. On SquadCast, it's really just like, as long as each person has their audio and video settings together, and we even help with that, with like what I said before about the equipment transparency and settings, like that is really, there's a whole set of things you'd no longer have to worry about, and then some things that you might need to consider, like your internet connection and things like that. Like we tend to think of our recording setup as like, okay, my camera, my microphone, maybe this wire, my audio interface, like the software I'm using. But I'm not thinking about like the dusty router in the corner now as an integral piece of my recording stack, right? Like, so I think it's just that kind of new awareness that comes with recording in these different ways. So we honestly suck at recording in person. We've done it. We can do it. We've seen people do it. We've gotten better at it. But yeah, it's a whole different set of considerations.
Right. So I'm also curious about your background. Zach, you mentioned you're a developer. Rock, what about you?
My background is in accounting and finance. So I was working at an accounting firm for most of my professional life. That really got me exposed to a bunch of executives, board members, founders, and really got me excited about doing something more entrepreneurial and independent. And so when Zach proposed this idea, I had already been kind of looking and preparing for something like that. So the fact that it was a journey that him and I would be co-piloting together, that sounded awesome and fun, because I knew anything that he'd put in his mind to was gonna happen. I like to think of myself in a very similar way. And just this opportunity to do it was, it just felt like there was more risk in not giving it a try, not giving it a shot. But it was a big jumping away from some pretty secure jobs. But I'm sure glad we did it, because we love what we do and still finding ways to keep ambitious. And it's amazing that 6 years later, we still feel like we're just getting started.
Did you take any external investment when you got started?
No, we didn't. So very aware that the startup game, especially technology startups, typically are funded from outside investors, angel investors, venture capitalists. It's not that we didn't try that or don't see that as a potential option for SquadCast, but in the early days, we were just really focused on building the product, building relationships with the community, and nurturing a customer base. And, just figured if we built those things up, that positioned us well for anything. Fortunately, we've just been able to grow only off of customer revenue and the initial investment that Zach and I did to get the company up and running up until it could fund itself. And then that's when we took the jump to working on the project full time and left our more corporate jobs behind. And yeah, it's a remarkable what things will do once you give yourself an opportunity and really bet on yourself and just continue to show up every day, working hard at something. Don't give up. It's not a straight path. As much as I'd love for things to be linear, it's been anything but that. So it's not without its challenges and ups and downs, but to have a partner like Zach, who we continue to grow and help grow each other just as we're growing the business, it's been a tremendous experience from my perspective.
So how big is SquadCast now? Like, how many employees? Where are they?
Yeah, the team is up to 13, and we've been remote from day one. So our team is all over the place. We are on both coasts in California and New York, Florida, Canada, Mexico, several states within the US. Yeah, all over. So
you said you funded your company from your paychecks. Is that how it works? Upfront?
Basically, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's right. We self-funded, we bootstrapped until the product got to kind of covering its own cost. And that's when we had the discussion to make the jump to go full-time. Not that we were able to pay ourselves salary at that point. So we kind of set the clock running at that point and kind of gave ourselves a year to get to a point where we could cover salary. And then, of course, bringing on our team and being able to grow from customer revenue has been really, really awesome because, there wasn't a ton of venture for podcasting companies back in 2016. If you go back to videos from them, there's like podcasting's the butt of investor jokes I've heard from that time. I don't think it's like that anymore. But as you can imagine, the economics change as our company grows and the venture market evolves. It's really great to kind of reach a point of scalability without needing that outside capital.
Yeah, it must give you a lot of freedom to make decisions.
That's right. It comes with a degree of independence, but also venture capital isn't just capital, it's also smart money, right? So it comes with the standing on the shoulders of giants and those who have come before you. So that's where we were very cognizant of that from the beginning, that we didn't want to forego those types of relationships or opportunities. And we have a lot of advisors and mentors who help us in that effort.
So right now with SquadCast, how is the company structured? You are the CTO, CEO, Rock, you're the CFO. And what about the other 13 people? Like, do you have managerial people, or is everybody an independent?
That's right. We have a few management positions, like the head of our support team. We have a marketing manager. We have a community and content manager. We have a lead designer, a lead software engineer, a team of software engineers that Gene, our lead engineer, is at the helm of. Yeah, hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but and we also work with a lot of teams who are on a project basis, external to our company, things like that. But the things that are core to our company, like engineering and our intellectual property and all of those things that I mentioned, those are all valued team members that are along for the ride, right here to contribute, stakeholders, quite frankly.
At what point did you decide to start a podcast?
I can't remember exactly when, but it just felt like something we had to do, not just because we wanted to use the product and dog food it ourselves, but also we just wanted to walk the talk and live life through our customers and community members' shoes and really learn what it's like to be a creator ourselves. I mean, we got into this game because we love content creators. And so now the opportunity to be one using software that we created, it's an incredible experience and just feels like something we didn't have a choice in, because quite frankly, I didn't necessarily want to have a podcast at first. I love that we do it now. I love being a podcaster. I love all the benefits that it's provided me, not just like in business, but like in life in general, talking, listening, all that kind of stuff. So I don't remember exactly when, but it just, all of the companies that we look up to in podcasting, they're very involved creators themselves. And so it felt like a good fit for us and just natural. This is Zach and I really do love this stuff. Live, eat, breathe, sleep, all of it. So for us to do it again, using our own software, it just seems like a no-brainer. I mean, we use the software in all sorts of ways to have meetings, to host like webinars or now like private webinars we're going to be starting to open up. I mean, there's just so many ways that we are using something that we created to connect with people. So I love that. And podcasting is absolutely one of the core ones.
Yeah, we were going to ask, are you seeing other like customers starting to use SquadCast for doing things other than recording sessions?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting use cases because we very much started with the problem that I had mentioned, right? Being remote with recording a podcast. I mean, the first one that kind of punched us in the face was video recording. That was not part of our initial plan or hypothesis. It seemed like too big of a lift, too big of a problem. We were hypothesizing that audio alone might be too much for most people's network to handle while holding a real-time conversation, while having all these presence connections going on. So that's where we kind of needed to observe audio and kind of the size there. And then video, you also run the risk of people just plugging in a 4K camera and just like letting it ride, People are going to try stuff on the internet. So it was our most requested feature, and we listen. We're big on listening. It's one of our core values at SquadCast, and that's another reason being a creator, right, is really helpful to have that empathy and understand why people want things in the product. And there's only so far you can take that with dog fooding. So jumping on in sessions like this with y'all, valued customers, creators that we're proud to serve, is also always a learning experience. We always walk away with things that we can improve in our product. And video, because we had it for the real-time conversation, I think it was Rock who we were initially going to have audio only, where this web page would be kind of like a phone call where you're just kind of talking to some pixels. But Rock called that out as weird in the beginning, and we wanted to see eye contact and body language. And turns out, right, there's a reason why. It's a huge percentage of how people communicate. It's like 70, 80%, something like that, of communication is nonverbal. So even while we were still only recording audio, we had video in the UX so that you had that level of communication. And I think that inspired a lot of our creators to be like, well, can I just get that video? Obviously, you already have access to my camera. I look good on the page. Like, I want that, right? So that was one of the first ones where it became increasingly obvious why that was the case. And I also get it, right? You don't have to do any extra work. If you're a creator on SquadCast who wants to add video recordings to your production to maybe grow your audience on YouTube, or with video in general performs better on social, you click, your experience is the same. You don't have to like do anything more to get video other than just have a subscription that has that feature on it. And you get those video files by just clicking the same start and stop button. You just get more files and more formats at the end. So it's kind of really, really nice that we didn't need to change our UX there. But along the way, we've, listening to our customers, right? One of our customers who records the most volume in recording time through the platform is actually an audiobook producer from Albuquerque. And he was able to kind of shut down his physical studio that only people could get to in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His business was kind of geographically constrained. As you can imagine, if you just kind of take that into the cloud, you can run multiple sessions in parallel. You can work with authors and voice actors in different geographies that maybe you have a different pay rate, right? And you can scale up your business in ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with just, your physical studio in your city. So that's another one that's really interesting, as well as just like voiceover work in general. I think that's similar to audiobooks, but that's a growing category amongst YouTube creators is just kind of these voiceover videos where they have B-roll or they have their own stuff that they're talking over. Maybe it's a screen recording. We do that too on SquadCast. So you can imagine how we don't have a ton of opinions about where the content is published or ends up that we help creators make and collaborate on, but you can see how they kind of lend themselves to these different platforms where creators publish their stuff and engage with their audience. Private podcasting is another one that's huge, right? Enterprises doing podcasting inside their organization. So never meant really to see the light of day, not meant to grow their business or customers or anything. But like if you're Google, you were remote before the pandemic, right? Because they have offices all over the world. Or ESPN, right? Maybe is a better example where ESPN Deportes has always been in Mexico City. Headquarters is up in Seattle, right? So while those people were in offices, they're still geographically distributed. So I think that those types of productions, they need a platform like SquadCast, quite frankly.
So do you see a shift towards video in terms of the volume of content recorded, or is it still predominantly audio? Like what is the trend that you're seeing?
So this is a huge topic in podcasting right now that we're seeing play out. It's something that we are participating and contributing in by helping folks record content, video content on SquadCast, like Zach mentioned. From our perspective, we are seeing more of our creator base embracing and adopting video. However, I think also what folks are learning is the production time and just what it takes to produce video content is so much more than audio. I mean, the equipment cost is different. You got to now think about lighting in addition to having a camera and all that stuff. And then just the actual editing and production of it is not like double the time of an audio show. It's probably like quadruple maybe. So I just think it's one of those things where it's easy to say, yes, I want to add video, but it is a heavier lift overall to create it at the quality that you would want to be similar to what I would hope you're creating as your audio show. So one of the things that I think works well is video is absolutely something that I think should be embraced, but only if you're ready. If you're still having trouble staying consistent with your audio show, you might not want to start adding on video. But hey, if you're crushing it with the audio show, you're already doing something once a week, maybe twice a week, and you're looking to take it up to the next level, I think adding video is something to consider. There's so many different ways to use it, whether it's having that content published to YouTube or chopping them up into shorter clips to promote on social media. All that stuff is beneficial and helps you expand your reach, helps you reach an audience that's might not be looking for you on the podcast apps, that may not even be audio listeners themselves, but still want to consume and benefit from your content. And so it definitely makes sense that adding video is going to be a trend that continues to rise. But I just think in podcasting, everybody's still figuring out how that fits into their schedule, into their workflow. One of the examples that we touched on briefly was like the audio podcast, the audio drama podcasts. What's their play in video here? I mean, it's a tough thing to create that content in audio only format. So is there a video play? And if so, what? Because I think that's even more production from an already expensive and time intensive type of production. But I think it could be awesome if you get it right. So, and then we're thinking, how can we contribute and help out with that? So it's really exciting and fun, but also something I still think is being figured out. But the data is pretty undeniable that it's at least worth considering and attempting. But I think when folks try to tackle too much at first, it could be pretty overwhelming and not set them up for success. And that's what we're all about here at SquadCast, just trying to set them up for success, get them to show up every day, do the work, have a long-term mindset, and just continue to grow everything from there. So yeah, I mean, what's your take on video for you guys?
So we are publishing on YouTube, because I did see that trend for my other podcasts, for the Russian-speaking podcasts, is I got a lot of views on YouTube, even though it was just audio only with the cover. Basically, I had to pull it in iMovie, just generate the video file, publish it on YouTube, because lots of people listen to music on YouTube now, and keeping in your pocket with YouTube Premium, and people listen to podcasts the same way. So actually generate a YouTube videos for this podcast as well, and we do get some listens, but we're very new, we don't get many listens at this point yet. So I was just about to suggest to Arnab, maybe we should record our next episode in video in SquadCast, publish it on YouTube and just see what happens. But then I realized there will be things that we will say that maybe we want to cut out. I don't want to deal with processing video.
That's the quadruple effort that Rock is talking about.
Yeah, because I was thinking about, maybe we take the audio file and then do the regular production, and our high quality stuff is in audio. But video, we just publish whatever we record. But then there is stuff that shouldn't be said. Even if you just take that recording and publish it, there will be stuff that, shouldn't be there. Like you're going to close your door when your daughter was doing stuff and interrupting our podcast recording. You don't want that stuff in the video. But then I'm not up for extra 2 or 3 hours of time doing video production. And also the rendering time is probably another 40 minutes for 1 hour show.
Yeah, you're dealing with, bigger files, more files, multiple apps. Not to discourage, right? We do video production. We are also a content company in SquadCast. We have Ariel, our head of content, and Vince is our producer, and we work with Maribel as our video producer. So yeah, I mean, it is more, but I think it really comes down to finding the workflow that works for you. And that's where I encourage people to just try it. You don't need to publish it, right? But just kind of try and see where you run into roadblocks or what's kind of a deal breaker for you. Are you somebody who really cares about lighting and color correction and all of those kinds of things? Or is it okay to have a door close, right? Some people kind of accept some degree of realness there. And I think that's okay too. And I was just looking up our stats to your question about trends with video. It's almost 50-50. It's a little bit in favor of audio right now, but looking at sessions where people record with, video recording or audio only, it's almost a 50-50.
How about say a year or a couple of years back? Was it very different?
So we also made video more accessible when we updated our pricing last summer. So I think that was also a contributing factor to more people recording video. We honestly priced video too high initially when we first rolled it out. But as you can imagine, right, it was in beta. We wanted to kind of limit, right, the inbound jump on people doing that on day one. So that's another aspect to it that I think has encouraged people to create more. But just trying to be real about it, right? Like there are things that now we're talking about much more than a podcast. And if you're just coming into it with like, oh, this will be just my podcast plus a little bit more, that is not a real expectation. I want to be really, really clear about that and just try it for yourself. We just think it's kind of lowering the barrier to entry, makes it more accessible to try things, right? We're discouraged to try things if it's really far out of reach, but it may seem like, oh, that's where all the growth is. So I would try it out because I think you made some really good points, Ilya, about the growth, like test, right? Where we draw parallels all the time between running a startup and having being an independent content creator. And what would be the startup answer, right? Do a test, do an A/B test. So, I would encourage people to try that out and see if it's worth the ROI of before you invest in a camera and a lens and multiple lights and your environment and all that stuff. And some of those things can even be rented. So I think there's even more of like an on-ramp here than just like dropping a bunch of G's on day one.
I also like Rock's suggestion that at the end of the day, you are producing content and you have to figure out whether you like doing that and can you do that for a long term consistently. And the easier way to do that seems to be like produce the audio once. It's way lower post-production effort for you to do it. If you're paying somebody, it's way lower cost that way too. And get consistent, figure out that you really like it, and then take on the jump. Meanwhile, start experimenting with video. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, what I think we could try, Arnab, is for our next recording, we could actually record the video just so we have the files and maybe just cut a couple of clips, like 1 minute long clips that we can publish on social media without actually publishing the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a great way to get started.
And then when we do the production of the audio, we will know the timestamp of where that is, so we can easily locate that part in the video. Yeah, we can just try it out. I mean, I've done video production before. Actually, it's a huge pain, but like for like a couple of minutes, that's not going to be a problem.
Are you doing post-production in what software are you using for post-production?
So I'm using Reaper. I'm using a bunch of VST plugins like Isotope, RX Suite,
awesome.
And the compressor, the equalizer, all the additional stuff. As of episode number 4, which is going to be released next week, we've outsourced our sound engineering to somebody who I know based out of Germany. He does it for us. We pay him. But what I do cut the content before it goes to him. So I've started using the app called Ferrite for the iPad. So it's on my iPad. I use my Apple Pencil. I have an iPad Pro, so an Apple Pencil too. And I just do very quick. Basically, I cut out stuff that shouldn't be there. And then he cuts out kind of the pauses. He also uses Isotope, so he applies all of the same filters that I would apply. But it saves me probably, 3 or 4 hours by not having to cut out kind of the extra silence, the breaths that Isotope wouldn't catch, all this kind of technical stuff.
If I can plug one of our collaborators here, like Descript might be a nice way to also facilitate that paper edit step and the handoff with collaboration and working with audio and video, so you can just kind of go into audio and just work there. And then all those same cuts, rather than having to like note those time codes or whatever, those can also be applied to your video. So, and they support VST plugins. So as far as I know, we don't use it to that extent with the plugins. I think we do that step in like Adobe Audition. Yeah, but we kind of move between those two.
Just like SquadCast, Descript is the other thing that has come up in every single of our episodes so far.
And we have an integration with them. So moving those huge video and audio files between them, we'll just move it from our cloud to their cloud, and you don't have to like download, re-upload, import. That takes seriously like half an hour sometimes, like a long time. So that is something that's also really, really efficient between our products.
Yeah, so we tried using Descript for quite a bit.
Another time. It's fine.
He's using Reaper. That's enough said.
No. This script is really awesome. Actually, I produced, I think, the first couple of episodes. I edited them with this script, and then I did the additional sound engineering in Reaper after exporting files from this script. So what I realized is that we actually don't cut out that much content. So we basically just cut out, like, I'll have to say this. Like a few minutes ago, we were talking about like Arnab's microphone not picking up sound, right? Yeah, which, the listener, you didn't hear because I cut it out from the recording. So
you're welcome.
This stuff is pretty minor. And I can easily do this in Ferrite with Apple Pencil. Actually, I can do it faster in Ferrite than I can do it in Descript. But then what I use Descript for is I actually transcribe the end result in Descript so that I can easily just skim through the text and see what was mentioned, all of the gear, all of the links, books, podcasts, whatever. So I can create show notes from that. So basically, the Descript, you use it not for audio editing, but for more like post-production transcript show notes scenario.
So the app that you Ferrite or
Ferrite, it's Ferrite. We will add it to show notes.
There's a few people in our Squad Pod community who are huge fans of Ferrite on the iPad. So I know that can be a really nice UX. I'm not trying to pull you away from it, especially with the pencil. I mean, that's kind of a unique thing, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, because like in audio editing, you have to drag a lot. And then when I drag, I always get repeated stress injury on my right fist, regardless of what I use. If I use the mouse, if I use the trackpad, I think it's like historical. I had these issues with my guitar playing like 20 years ago. So I think it stems from like my teenage years. And wow. Apple Pencil gives me that, ability to do it in a different kind of posture. And also what I like about the kind of the iPad editing is like I could just pull it out for 5 minutes, like listen to 5 minutes of audio and then like do it incrementally, like when I have like a free minute. Whereas with the computer, like you have to have all of that set up.
Mm-hmm. Does it also do the transcribe and you can basically edit audio with text or?
No, Ferrite is super simple. I basically just like listen to the audio and then like cut it out as a listen. What I was able to achieve, so for 1 hour of audio content at the source, I spent probably 1.5 hours cutting it. Whereas if I do it in Reaper, it's probably 3x the time. And in Descript, obviously it's shorter, but what I found not really working well in Descript for me is when I was trying to cut out things like pauses and breaths, they are not in the text. So I still have to drag the audio around. And then Descript is much slower than a proper DAW when it comes to like manipulating audio segments.
I've heard that.
Yeah. And also like I have a lot of keyboard shortcuts.
So one more thing we wanted to talk about SquadCast is you talk about this in your podcast is early on, the community engagement and the feedback that you got from it was really instrumental in building and shaping the product. You went to some, I think, podcast-related conferences and stuff, sponsored some of that. We wanted to hear more about this, what kind of engagement you got.
Yeah, I think it really comes from the fact that we were, although big fans of podcasters and podcasting, we weren't podcasters ourselves. So our thoughts were, we need to immerse ourselves with that community, with podcasters and people that are in that industry. And so doing that is where do they hang out? Well, they hang out on Facebook in a lot of Facebook groups. So we were hanging out there, but then they also meet up at conferences, or we found local meetups here in the Bay Area, but there's other ones in all over the US. And so just trying to attend as many things as we could, build reputations with folks in the space, build up the brand of SquadCast, and then just talk to people, listen, get them using the product, learn from them. We met our founding advisor, Harry Duran, at the first podcast movement that we attended, and he was instrumental in those early days, providing us feedback, like quick feedback to iterate the product every day or every week based on that feedback to really get inside the mind of a podcaster and what they would want. And, we couldn't have done it without the community and folks like Harry. But it does take a lot of effort of putting yourself out there and immersing yourselves in something that maybe you feel like an outsider or a little bit imposter syndrome with. But fortunately for us, our experience of the podcast industry was extremely welcoming and very collaborative. And so we just saw the companies and folks that we looked up to in the space being heavily engaged in the community, and we just did our version of that. And so thankfully it's blossomed into its own unique type of community. I think that's largely driven by the work of our head of content and community, Ariel Nissenblatt, who has an amazing reputation in the space of her own, but has built up a community that was early days of thriving from before she came on board, and then she's just taken it to the next level. So yeah, it's something that we can't say support enough, and encourage people to do in their own way, whether it's immersing themselves with wherever their audience is to help grow their podcast, or if they have products and services, like doing the same thing.
Cool. So you mentioned Podcast Movement. Is it the name of the event?
That's correct. Yeah. So Podcast Movement would be, I would say, probably the biggest conference, at least in the US, as far as like has the biggest buzz around it. Products and companies tend to make big announcements at these events. There's 2 a year for Podcast Movement, but then there's other ones like we love Podfest. And then there's a few other events that we like to go to that are a huge part of the SquadCast story and how we've again built up our reputation and relationships with other figures in the space.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the podcast, people being very friendly and it's a good community. I think in the podcasting space, every podcaster basically is their own brand. Their podcast is uniquely them. So there is less kind of competition. I mean, folks like ESPN might compete with whoever else does sports stuff. But like, we don't compete with Harry Duran necessarily, who is the host of Podcast Junkies, because our podcasts are, they have their own uniqueness in kind of the personalities and value that we provide. So it removes some of that adversity, I think. But also everybody struggles with the same technical problems. Like we are in the podcasting space to do the content. We want to talk and not necessarily deal with like file uploads and all that crap, right? So I can totally see how people were really wanting to collaborate with you on that.
Yeah, if you look at the categories in podcasting, it's likely that you're going to find, if you look at the top 10 in every category and then like look at the content of all those of those 10, they're likely to have interviewed each other. They're likely to have recommended guests to each other. They're likely to have guests in common. And I think that that's something that's pretty unique to podcasting because of what you say. There's a real human aspect to podcasting and just audio in general. And much has been said about like the intimacy factor in podcasting. And I think that's a big driver for why it's collaboration over competition.
Can we switch back to your podcast a little bit between two mics? So you have two types of episodes. You have the two of you talking, and you have like you bring episodes from other shows recorded in SquadCast and sort of promote them that way, right? And showcase them that way on your show. So when I was listening to a few of your episodes as I was doing the research, I personally found really enjoyable to be listening to you guys. But then when unexpectedly like somebody else's episode would come up in the feed, it felt a bit jarring for maybe a couple of minutes until I kind of started to get used to like, okay, so this is actually not Zach and Rock, it's somebody else. But then that experience is really unexpected, I guess. So I'm curious, do you hear any feedback from your listeners about those I think you call them the mic drop episodes, and also if you see any difference in engagement levels for those?
I think they're pretty similar in terms of engagement. I mean, people at a minimum, right? It serves as a demo of what SquadCast can do, right? At its like fundamental reason for existing, but also, right, because we're big on community and specifically lifting up the creators that we're proud to serve. It seemed like a no-brainer and a win-win to bring them into as even more valid examples of what can be created on SquadCast. And sometimes we bring on their shows and we'll interview them. I think that's kind of the best case scenario. Like I think we did that with American Vigilante, was a award-winning true crime audio drama show where we both interviewed the host as well as featured an episode. So I think that's kind of the best case scenario. And we've played with it a bit where I think now we do, because of the constraint that you mentioned, we don't want it to be jarring, to your point. So we started recording like the intro and having kind of some of our voice on there. And we're debating whether that should be like its own feed where we can do things. We could drop one of those like daily, kind of thing, and have that as a dedicated feed for our audience. And yeah, we're experimenting with it. So I'm not surprised that you've seen a bit of change over time, and also the different types of episodes in our feed, and even the episodes with Rock and I, the interview episodes, are going to be evolving to be more of a narrative style here in the near future. So we're learning. We're content creators ourselves, as we've mentioned. I think the last couple weeks, I've been creating content like pretty much every day, maybe every other day, something like that. But I've noticed it increased for me personally, and I was already pretty prolific in the content that I was creating before that. It felt like so. I think, yeah, it's something where we're learning from our audience. And then when we learn those, our customers, and then when we learn something from them, we're eager to show those lessons on the podcast.
How have you grown as hosts after doing so many episodes? I think Harry Duran asked this question to you guys, actually, maybe a couple of years ago. So I just want to ask it again.
Well, there's a couple things that we've learned about each other. And of course, we always learn something about our product using it to record. Occasionally somebody will invite us to their show and interview us on like Riverside or Zencaster or Zoom or something like that. And we learn from those sessions too. It's interesting what you see when people do things differently, and that's cool. So I think that it really comes down to like solving problems, right? Is how I think of it. And what problems are we solving? What other people aren't? But what we've learned about Rock and I is pretty interesting. We've picked up on a few things where when you're interviewing and you have a co-host, right? Video helps avoid collisions. So this was something we learned early on. Everybody listening's probably been on a conference call where there's like 1 or 2 seconds of silence and then 5 people start speaking. Why is that?
No, you go first. No, you go first.
Yeah, because they can't, you don't have body language to go off of. So over time, one of the first lessons I remember us kind of learning was some cues for each other with who's going to kind of speak next. We've gotten better at like being natural between scripting versus going off script. We're not huge fans of scripts, but they end up being part of most productions in some way or another. So how do you deliver that? How do you sound natural? I think that's something that, quite frankly, we were recording yesterday and we're struggling with that. And then as we added video, right, now you got to deal with like eye contact with the camera and reading through a teleprompter and camera A, camera B, right? So we've learned a lot as creators, and that's just in the production of the episode itself, not even pre-production or post-production. So I think there's a lot of nuance in how you approach a guest, what's the angle for the story, being on other people's shows and like learning from them. We've been very fortunate to be invited on a lot of shows, and like we're very grateful for you inviting us on this show. And I always am paying attention. I like to note people's level of preparation because that's something that we are big on and recommend to our customers and community. And some people do it, some people don't. I will say that in your preparation, thank you, by the way, for your level of preparation for this episode. One thing that I noted was that you gave the option to have a pre-interview conversation or not. You kind of left it up to the guest. I've never seen it given as an option. I've always been told you have to come to this thing before, or we don't do that at all. So I really like that you kind of give the choice, and that was something I noticed that was new in y'all's preparation.
And to be honest, I think we don't have the option of not giving the option right now because we're not that big yet. But I think it makes sense, right? Like, you are always interviewing busy people. They don't always have the time to meet you twice. And this is already like an hour and a half long session on a busy day. So makes sense, yeah.
But it is a good move to build up that rapport and not have, so that you can just, once the recording does happen, especially if they're a busy person, you don't have to spend the first 5, 10, 15 trying to build up some rapport, some chemistry. And I think that's, for me, what I've learned as a host is like how to do that quickly how to make someone feel comfortable. I think for me also as a host that I've grown is like, I mean, the typical stuff, getting more comfortable. I used to get like very nervous, still sometimes do, but not nearly as much as I used to. Don't nearly as much get grossed out by the sound of my own voice. I'm pretty used to that as well. But where I see the benefits of podcasting show up is actually when I'm talking to non-podcasting people. So like typically comes up with family or friends, and I'm like asking them these questions and they're like, wow, you're asking some good questions and you're a great listener. And it's like, I'm genuinely interested, but I also do think that this experience in podcasting has just kind of improved my ability to do both of those things in a way where I don't even realize I'm necessarily doing it. But if it makes people feel special, I'm all about that. So that's good.
If I can add to that, the job interviews at SquadCast, if you're applying to work on our team, it's not like any other interview you've ever been part of because of this. Like we our interviews are different. It's more like this than it is like a traditional kind of job interview.
Yeah. So our first guest, who was on our second episode, Brian McCullough, he made a really good point about preparation and just like being conversational. He says he always over prepares so that whichever way the conversation goes, he always can take it that way, right? So he doesn't have to go like off the script or off a rigid agenda. So he just knows enough to go wherever. And generally, independently from Brian, we follow the same approach. We have our notes. I actually have the Google Docs file next to the SquadCast window. And we didn't cover half of the topics that we had on our list. So yeah, conversation went the way it went. And I think it's been, a great discussion.
I think that's often the case, right? And it gives you that confidence to go off script and sound more natural. We've all heard episodes where it's like, interesting, next question. Interesting, next question. Right. I think I like the challenge of coming up with stuff on the fly, and yeah, you can't really fake that if you're not prepared. And one of our other advisors, Jordan Harbinger, I know, like, I think his level of preparation is probably more than I've seen. He's a little obsessive about it, and it's kind of become one of his things, and it shows in the interviews that he has. If you're going to go talk to Kobe, probably prepare for a couple weeks or months for that one.
To close, what are your favorite podcasts right now? What are you listening to?
Other than Metacast, of course.
Yeah, of course. Episode 8, baby. My favorite one. So one that I'm always listening to every week is the All In podcast. It's hosted by 4 folks in the startup entrepreneurial game. So they're always a fun time. The one that I've really come to love in the last year is this one called Raised by Wolves. Were you raised by wolves? And it's a play on that term, like, were you raised by wolves? And it's a show all about manners. And so they go through all these like normal life topics. And it's like, what's the polite way to do this? What's the thoughtful way to do this? Because I don't know about you guys, but like living in an apartment, there's these encounters all the time, like laundry, trash. There's all these different things where it's like, I want to be a good neighbor and the right person, but why are you leaving your laundry in the dryer and make me got to touch your stuff, man? Like, and so what's the polite way to do that? And this show does it. They do it in such a funny, creative way. So highly encourage you checking that out. It's like all podcasting. It's a beautiful example of what podcasting is. It's so weird, quirky, something you're not going to hear anywhere else. Independently produced. I love it.
I too am a fan of All In, and I've listened at Rock's recommendation to a few episodes of Raised by Wolves, and the one I've been listening to recently is called Something Was Wrong. And it's about abusive relationships and kind of a true crime approach leading up to. So it's true crime, but it's not like a murder, solving a murder kind of thing. It's more like, how do these relationships evolve into abuse? How do people manipulate each other? And then, of course, the whole family aspects of it and things like that. Honestly, my wife played an episode just randomly while we were driving, and I think it was recommended from the You're Wrong About show, or You're Wrong About podcast, which is something that we like, and we just totally got sucked in and like binged the first full season on a long drive. So yeah, Something Was Wrong is my current favorite show. Cool.
Well, this has been an awesome episode. Thanks for sharing all the details. We continue to use and love SquadCast, so keep doing great job with that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the tips.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for walking us through and giving us the meta version of your production strategy and stuff. Hopefully this leads to some video content. But we got a firsthand view of watching the sausage potentially get made.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're happy to help.
I think so far we've implemented tips from every single guest that we had on the show. So your contribution will probably be the video.
Yeah. Well, we've done our work.
Yeah. Like Zach, Rock, thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much, guys.